and their main goal is to, or actually what they do is they try to defend Palestinian national and human rights, and they try to put the Palestinian question on the agenda, the political agenda. So he will tell us now more about their work and how we can learn from it. So, thank you.
Good afternoon. I would like to alter a little bit of the introduction about me and about Palestine. But before I do, I got a little bit of information about this association or group, but I would like to know a little bit more. You were in Palestine a few months ago, 3 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago. And you have...
It's over there.
Something from you?
Yeah. Thank you.
And your stay there was for about how long?
8 days.
8 days. And your trip, how did it, can someone brief me a little bit about what kind of trip was it? What did you do? And
Who wants to do that?
I do it.
Sarah.
yeah. I'm sorry for starting in such a way, but it would help me in talking to you, because I'm not going to take the 30 minutes which we agreed on. I'm going to talk much less than that, and then if you have questions, then we can talk about it. But I would like to understand your trip, what happened in it, and then I would go forward to tell you what can you do here, through what Palestine is doing here specifically.
So can anyone provide us for a short recap about what we talked in earlier before?
Just one person can just give me a brief.
Well,
what did you?
it was a study trip, and we went there. We met a lot of university students. We met a lot of politicians and academics. We visited a lot of cultural sites as well, and it was all with the aim to understand the Palestinian identity a bit better. And obviously you cannot completely understand the identity without knowing the core of the conflict itself, so there was a lot of focus on that as well. We spoke with even, I think, 2 Israeli women as well who were like in favor of the Palestinian cause and told us their sides of the stories. We visited sites such as demolished houses, we visited a Bedouin village, we visited this NGO called Tent of Nations. I'm sure you know it as well, yeah. And aside from that, we also had just like some less politically loaded things, such as our visit to the Dead Sea and stuff like that. But we really tried to get to know the Palestinian cause better in its essence. That's what we were trying to do.
Okay, which universities did you go to?
We went to the University of Hebron, and then we had this International Peace and Youth Conference in Tulkarem. And I think, I don't know, I'm not sure, maybe like, I don't know how many universities were there. Yeah, but I'm not there yet. Yeah, and the University of Kaduri, I think. So I don't know, we visited quite some universities.
Okay.
And at the conference there were loads, so that's how we met a lot as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you as students, do you all come from the same field, or are you from different?
No.
Is there something that connects you besides sorry?
Being
Well,
No, I think it's just interest why people are here. Yeah.
okay. So you're basically interested in this specific topic, and that's why you're all here together. But you're also all students.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as it was said, my name is Ramzy Kumsieh. I'm from Beit Sahur. I don't know if you visited Beit Sahur. It's a small town within the governorate or the city of Bethlehem. There is actually also a very interesting story about this little town, and now there is a movie that is a documentary that has been produced about it, which is going through festivals. It's called the Wanted 18. I can go back to talk about it a little bit later because it can give you some information or some view about what kind of resistance happened in Palestine, and it's still happening, but like the different kinds of resistances that took place. So that you would know who is talking to you, I came here 6 years ago to the Netherlands as a student, as a master's student here in The Hague to do my international political economy specialization. And afterwards I started working with the one of the tribunals of the International Criminal Court, specifically the Lebanese tribunal. So I do not work for Palestine Link. I'm one of the founders of Palestine Link. I'm currently the chairperson of the board, but I'm not involved in the day-to-day of the tasks of what Palestine Link does. I'm here just to inform you about what this institution, what's the aim of this institution, why was it established, and what is it doing. It is a very small organization. We're talking about 5 board members, and every now and then we have a volunteer who comes to help. But there's one person who is the director, Gada Zidane, who was supposed to come and speak with you, but she couldn't because she was traveling. So Palestine Link is this body that exists in the Netherlands for 3 to 4 years now, that does not have any other equivalent because it basically consists of Palestinian voices who are trying to talk on a different level than the other Palestinian organizations who work with the people, who represent some people, some Palestinian people, immigrants or new immigrants who came here and who provide certain activities for them to bring them together. Palestine Link wanted to take the political issue of Palestine and speak with a Palestinian voice into a diplomatic level, to go more to the politicians, to go more into other civil society organizations, including schools and universities and other kinds of organizations, also unions, if we, as an example. The whole idea is not specifically about talking about the national identity of Palestine. It's more about the national cause, and I'm avoiding to use words like conflict because these are also terms that we are trying to redefine in our language when we speak here. So this is one of the aims of Palestine Link, is to reframe the Palestinian cause in the Netherlands because as I'm sure you're very well aware, that the Palestinian cause is framed in a specific way in most Western countries, or if I want to be specific, in most Western media or mainstream media as well. And this framing mostly does not reflect the framing of, or the voice of the marginalized, in which case are the Palestinians. But also the Palestinians cannot really be generalized in one big term because also Palestinians themselves are divided in different ways and different terms. And that can either be, if you would just think at the head, like just quickly, you could say maybe because they have different political affiliations, or maybe because they see the solution to the Palestinian cause in different ways. But also it's because of the practical reasons that the colonization and the occupation has created in actually dividing the Palestinian people either in where they are residing or what kind of ID they have, what kind of rights they have. And I'm not sure how aware you are, but I'm going to assume that you are very well aware about the different kinds of situations that the Palestinian people are divided upon. However, if you have questions, we can talk about them within the questions and answers. To move to the core of what I wanted to say is that Palestine Link tries to make the bridge here in the Netherlands between this society and the Palestinian society. And because we are all locals from Palestine and recently locals in the Netherlands, we're trying to build these connections between different institutions and organizations so that there would be a more understanding of the Palestinian people, the Palestinian society, how does it function, what are the major problems there. And we do that by different programs. Some of them are by bringing experts from Palestine over here, and what we call a college tour, where we go to the different colleges, and that also includes schools. It depends each year which partners we have. And also it depends what kind of experts we bring. Sometimes we have legal experts to talk about specific issue, for example, prisoners. Other times we have people who are coming to talk about the psychological problems of Palestinian children in schools, or people who have lost their parents or relatives in general because of the situation, and try to connect by making a broader understanding of what it means to be a Palestinian, or in general to be living under the Israeli occupation. So yeah, that's one of the programs, college tours. On the opposite, we also do the other way around, where we bring people from here to go back home, and when I say home, I mean Palestine, to do some kind of a tour, just like what you did. But we have done once a student tour, which was 2 years ago. But we try, because also we are a small organization, we don't have the capacity to do a lot. Sometimes we are limited with certain projects, and some of the projects were to also bring experts from here, either lawyers, journalists, or different other kinds of experts, to go to Palestine and do either a quick visit to see a certain, or to examine a certain specific issue in Palestine, or the last year we had a joint project with other organizations here in the Netherlands, where there was a study or research done about the situation of the Palestinian children prisoners within the Israeli prisons. So kids who are under the age of 18. And that was a project that we have to coordinate with Amnesty International, as well as the DCI, the Defense for Children International, and other small organizations here in the Netherlands. And it ended up with creating a report about the situation of the Palestinian children prisoners, and the violations that are happening in the Israeli prisons, specifically against the international laws. And this report, then we could, and we are using it in different ways to put pressure on, in general, if I want to say the state of Israel, but we try to do that through the channels that we have. And this is the other way that Palestine functions, is to actually pressure and question always the Dutch government by showing them their obligations towards international law in general, and putting them on the spot to understand their relationship with the state of Israel, and how does that, where is the duality of dealing with criminal states and still abiding by a Dutch law and an international law that calls for certain levels of staying up with dignity or human rights and such stuff. So such reports, such researches that we try to conduct can help us in dealing with such an issue, going to the government. And that's what we aim to keep doing by doing more researches and by also bringing journalists and go back to document what's happening in Palestine. But we're talking about Dutch journalists because, of course, there are many journalists working in Palestine. But when we are working in this specific society and you bring people who have names, then they can be much more influential. So that's also how we try to work. In general, this is what I can think of about what Palestine Link does. Besides those specific and directly, if I want to say, aggressive ways of dealing with our projects, we also have other projects to change the framework or how people see in general Palestinian people or Palestinian cause by presenting lighter events like movies or certain cultural events to present what is the Palestinian society is about in terms of culture, science, and different aspects. And these are also, I cannot say that we have many events like these, but these are small events that happen in collaboration with other institutions here in the Netherlands. Besides that, the level of the Netherlands, we also work on an international or European and international level where we coordinate with European Commission organizations that try to work within the EU Commission in Brussels to present agendas, present drafts for projects to bring about new decisions by the EU. And that specifically, I'm referring here to the boycott movement. Palestine Link is a supporter of BDS. I think you have heard of them, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And we try to not only bring this tool to the Dutch society and the European society in general to be implemented, because we know that there are still challenges of accepting this tool as a tool to use against the Israeli state. So we try to engage people in discussions about what it means to do BDS and whether it's valid to use BDS or not. So far, this has been going very well. As I'm sure you know, the Dutch government in itself has made decisions which are in favor of going towards more and more, not boycotting specifically, but right now putting limitations on exporting from the state of Israel. But BDS involves much more than economical boycott. It also includes cultural boycott, academic boycott, and different kinds of aspects, besides the divestment and the sanctions, which is a little bit further than what we can work towards at the moment, but it's part of the whole campaign that eventually will happen, hopefully. Besides that, I was told I have to say that we need volunteers all the time. So if you have time and you want to help, there is always something to do. And that's specifically when I'm talking to students. If I want to actually have someone helping us, because there are other things to be done, but I would specifically focus on doing researches that needs to be done. For example, and when we're talking about researches, it can be something simple that doesn't have to be about Palestine specifically, but it could be about the Netherlands here, the Dutch society, and how does it perceive, for example, the Palestinian cause. If we're talking about boycott, the academic boycott is something that is a little bit of a taboo here, that we cannot talk about it so much because people will just say, no, you cannot boycott academia because that field should be open for discussion and all people should be able to discuss, and that's the only way that we can go forward. And if we have boycott on academia, then we're limiting our ways of communication rather than actually helping. I do disagree, and there are other counter arguments to this. However, what I wanted to say is that by doing research of trying to see what kind of academic institutions here are willing to even talk about this subject, what kind of, what does the Dutch society in general, the public, the general public, think about boycott, cultural, academic, or different. This is one kind of research that can be done that can help associations or organizations like Palestine Link or others to go further in trying to start new campaigns or use different tools to put pressure internationally. The main cause eventually is to have more pressure to have the Israeli state come to an end, to end the occupation, or to do something to change the reality on the ground in Palestine. Because being Palestinian, living in Palestine, one of the ways of resisting is to resist with a stone or with a gun violently, or to do anything, because people there could reach to desperate ways of defending themselves or just being frustrated and trying to use anything to change their situation. It could be useless sometimes, it could make the situation much worse, because when we talk about Palestine-Israel, it's a topic that's receiving a lot of international attention, and everyone has a say and an opinion about what should happen there, but not everyone really understands and lives the day-to-day life of the people who are there. So, in my opinion, the only way to actually change something on the ground in Palestine is to have the powerful side, the occupier or the colonizer, to let go of their power and treat people equally, or accept to have a shared responsibility with the Palestinians over what's happening there. And for that to happen, no oppressor or no colonizer is going to give up power unless there is pressure from a powerful or more powerful side to do that. And for that to happen, that the work needs to happen here in the international arena. So, besides this, I don't know what else to tell you, but I'm here open for questions. And if you have specific things about how you can help that you want to know, I'm happy to answer. Yes, please.
It's quite a specific question. You spoke earlier about having influence on the agenda of the European Commission.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do it? Like from a practical point of view, how do you lobby at the European Commission? How could you pressure them to ask certain questions or put certain topics on the agenda? How is that done?
It's done much easier than I used to think. It's true that it seems that place is a bit unreachable. How do you go? What are the channels to do that? Of course, at the end, it depends on politics, what's happening in general in the whole political spectrum in Europe. But a simple letter to a person who is in chair in the European Commission should make some change, because everyone who is in those positions have a liability to actually answer to any European citizen or any European organization if you put them on the spot. Movements or campaigns can start by having, of course, if it's coming from one individual, it usually doesn't do much, but when you're collecting from different institutions or organizations or specifically civil society organizations that speak of the people, then these campaigns can lead to put more pressure on politicians who are there. Also, the politicians themselves, they do have opinions and they keep changing. So within the political game, you need to keep following what's happening and you need to keep campaigning with different members to bring a certain agenda into effect. Currently there is also within the European Commission, there is also one branch that deals with Israel-Palestine, and it's sort of a monitor of what's happening there and in Palestine and Israel, and what's happening in the European Commission in terms of policies and changes of policies. So by engaging with them, then you're up to date with what's happening and you can keep up by pushing, and that needs to be happening through campaigns. Campaigns needs to be happening through different civil society organizations, including student organizations like these. But for that to happen, more and more organizations needs to be involved. And what can actually push it forward is when public events are made, like public discussions about a specific topic, that can actually bring it into the public eye, and then there is more pressure because then the Commission has to listen. When there is a specific request, then it has to do something about it. It has to have an answer. And for an answer to be there, it also needs to be justified. So when you bring a discussion into them, then they do have to discuss it. And they have to present you with with answers that are supported. So, yeah, campaigns.
Thank you. Any other questions? Not at all?
Well, I do have one.
Sorry, I didn't see.
I'm Aura, and thank you for sharing the information. At the very beginning, you mentioned a movie called The 1 to 18. Was that the movie?
Yeah. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't. But and you also said that you are using movies as a means to create awareness in the public.
Yeah, I'm currently hoping to bring this movie, but it's just coming out and it's still going through festivals. So we hope we'll bring it here in the next year. So your question is specifically about this movie or in general?
Not more like how effective do you think showing movies on the topic?
It is effective. I think it is effective. During 6 years of being an activist here in the Netherlands, but also being an activist back home for many other years, I have seen that individual change does make a big change actually. And tools like movies do speak a lot. I'm not sure of how many of you have actually seen the movie Five Broken Cameras, for example. Yeah. It's a movie that, because also it has reached to the Oscars, it's with an arena, or also to other European festivals, not only the Oscars, it got more attention. So it's a tool for people to see what is actually happening on the ground, which certain talks like these cannot really convey the same message as it comes in a movie. The 1 to 18 is a movie about, it's a documentary semi-animation movie, and it's about the first Intifada, which was back in 1988 until 1990. And it talks about this little town Bet Sahur, and it talks about a civil disobedience way of resistance. It wasn't violent. It was when people were living under curfew, they couldn't move around, and there were many limitations on them receiving certain goods like food. And the town of Bet Sahur then had, at the time we were under the Israeli occupation, so we were paying taxes to the Israeli government. But then at the time these territories were officially called occupied under the Israeli administration. And no one was representing those people living in the occupied territories in the Israeli Knesset or the parliament. So they were paying taxes, but they were not being represented. And then the motto came that no taxation without representation, and the people from Bet Sahur started refusing to pay the taxes, and they all went to the with the municipality right now, which was back then the liaison between the Palestinian or the Bet Sahur local authority and the Israeli occupation, and they all threw their identity cards, which are issued by the Israeli occupation. And that was a major news in all international news bulletins that look at the Palestinians, they're implementing some civil disobedience, and it's a different image than what they were seeing every day of like people throwing stones and blood being shed. But Wanted 18 specifically is talking about 18 cows that were brought to Bet Sahur to produce milk, because milk was one of the products that were not allowed to be to enter into those territories. And so a few Palestinian guys from Bet Sahur decided to bring some cows and hide them in the city or the town of Bet Sahur and start producing milk. Once the Israeli authorities knew about it, then there was a hunt for the 18 cows. And then the 18 cows kept being hidden from one place to the other. And yeah, it sounds like a joke, but it was actually an actual story that took months. And the leaders of the Israeli army were saying that these, specifically on international media, that these cows are a national threat for the state of Israel. So, in general, this movie, it's a little bit funny, but in general, this movie shows that there are different ways of resistance that the Palestinian people have come up with. And it's not only violence that comes from Palestine. There are many more ways that the Palestinian people have used to try to get some kind of dignity, to try to get a better way of living. And this movie sheds the light on that specific area, which was very important for that town. Of course, 20 years later, the town is not the same anymore. It's completely destroyed in terms of the spirit of resistance, because things never changed and the situation kept being worse and worse. And you don't see that feeling of people coming together and resisting together anymore, because everyone is exhausted. At least that's how I see it. But yeah, I think that movies can be a very powerful tool to educate people, and when you educate people, then it can move them to do something. I know many activists, international activists, who joined the international solidarity movement and who try to do many things to either bring attention to what is happening or change the way people see Palestine. And it can put more pressure. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Not only movies, there are different kinds of cultural things, like dance, for example. There was a group of Palestinian dancers who was touring. I think they are still touring within Europe. but they were funded by Belgium and the Netherlands. And it's called, I don't know if you have seen any Palestinian dance before.
Yeah,
Exactly, Dabka. Yeah, so that's the name of the folklore dance, Dabka. But they have played with it because they're coming from different disciplines of dance, those Palestinian dancers. And it's more or less modern, contemporary, and folklore. So they changed the name from Dabka into Badke. So, as in a bad dance, but it's playing on the woods. And it was also a very beautiful way of showing the people outside that Palestinians also dance and there are still cultural events and cultural aspect to the life of Palestinians. So these kind of events also have.
Yeah, when we were in Tukaren at the conference, at the end of the day, the students there also provided us, what's it called, like they showed us the dance and they also asked us to dance with them. So it was very
because everyone can dance.
Yeah.
It's an easy way of but these kind of events, an association like you can also organize, of organizing for a dance group from Palestine to come here and do a tour, for example. To organize for someone to speak about a specific story. We have organized for people who live in Belaim. I don't know if you know about this city or town, which is on the borders between Israel and Palestine. That is still fighting all the time. There are like every Friday there are demonstrations happening there.
Those are not.
Sorry?
It's from the 5 broken cameras, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Goes there a lot. He's an Israeli, an American Israeli,
Yeah.
who struggles a lot with them
Right.
there, and
Yeah. So we brought 2 of the women who are there, who are like on the front fighting, for a speaking tour in the Netherlands. And these kind of tours also, when we go around to different places, to universities or schools, or like to with associations to bring people who want to listen to this, to speak about their experience, and that does make a change, and that in itself this is an important element of the Palestinian cause of changing the framing, because there is a very strong framing of the Israeli, I would say, propaganda of what's happening there, and it needs to be challenged by bringing different voices here. And these are some of the ways that you can use to do so.
So we also heard from the previous speaker that the Israeli lobby, they tend to push for parliamentary questions. So have you also tried it, and how did that go inside this country?
Yeah, for example, when we, I was just saying, when we brought those 2 women from Bahrain, we went to the parliament and we presented them with questions about their support for, specifically there was a case then in Belaim about the use of violence against peaceful demonstrations, and there are visits that happen by politicians from here to Palestine. And we asked them to go and actually visit that town and to see what's happening. And it worked. They did go. One of them went. But also in the parliament, when the women were here, we had a session with the parliamentaries, not all of them, but the representatives, and certain questions were asked the presentation was made and then certain questions were asked by them. It's of course not easy, because when you're meeting with Dutch parliamentaries, they also have a very specific idea of what's happening there. Their minds are also satisfied with Israeli propaganda and Israeli stories. So then they started challenging those people. but it's important to go to the trade encounter and present questions. But yeah, to go with empty-handed is not always the best way. To actually bring someone and present something, or you can bring a report, like the report that we did with the Amnesty International and the Defense for Children. We sent that report to the first to the Foreign Affairs Ministry and then to the Dutch government, to the Dutch Parliament, so that they can take a stand, because the Dutch or the Netherlands in general is part of certain agreements internationally to protect human rights, and this is part of their role. So you can put pressure on the Dutch government by presenting them with such issues, certain questions that are supported with really sufficient research. And that's why I say that it's important to do researches.
Just one more question. What was the name of the town again? The one that's on the border, where you said there's
Bil'ain.
Bil'ain.
It's B-I-L-I-N.
Thank you.
So, are there any more questions? So we're going to close now.
I have information about it. You don't speak Dutch, or do you all speak Dutch?
No.
Some.
Mostly, I think.
Mostly speak Dutch, but there are some people in
Well, if you want to know more information about Palestine Link, our website is a very good website and it keeps being updated. We also produce during the summer what was happening in Gaza. We started producing a newsletter, and that was a weekly newsletter on what was happening in Gaza, but now it's a monthly newsletter about what's happening in general in Palestine. And you can subscribe to that through the website. There's this is only in Dutch, I'm sorry. But you can, through this, you can get the information of how to get to the website. Also, the Facebook page is very active about not our work specifically, but about the general things that we want to promote within the Netherlands.
So we would like to thank you very much.